right, let's see if we got them both cooking here. All right, good deal. We are live. I think I even have the comments up. Good morning, everybody. Dr. Jeff Moore here, currently serving as the CEO of ICE, lead faculty for our cervical spine and lumbar spine courses. Great to be here on a Thursday. It's Leadership Thursday, which means it's Gut Check Thursday. We always got to open with that. And team, it looks rough. So for those of you looking to do it, it looks rough out there. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate that, man. Jordan Berry got the new Onward swag in, so we've got our shirts that we're representing. So Gut Check Thursday is 150 calories accumulated on the rower, but you've got 5 burpees every minute on the minute, including 0, 5 burpees, and then you have the rest of that minute to accumulate calories on the rower. So I'm kind of looking at my fate here and thinking if I can knock my 5 burpees out in 15 seconds and transition to the rower, I might have 35 seconds to pull on that handle. So thinking maybe we can hold 10s on calories and get through this thing in 15 minutes. It's going to be rough. It's going to be a rough day at the office. Unfortunately, and maybe not in my best judgment, we challenged a lot of the South College students. So I've got a feeling they're going to put some pretty good times up, and we're going to be chasing that. So looking forward to that. Hope you are all able to tag Ice Physio, hashtag Gut Check Thursday. Get those vids on there so we can see those times. All right, upcoming courses before we jump in and talk about questions. Upcoming courses, Ice Sampler is next weekend. Breaks all of our hearts. That's not in person. Hopefully that will never happen again. But it's going to be a great virtual event. We've got tons of content. I'm working on some of my content here this afternoon. August 8, 9 will be that. Lumbar Spine, I'll be in Chicago. We have 1 seat left. We'll be with the wonderful Kate at Rally Physical Therapy in Northern Chicago. So that's August 15th, 16th. And then we have Cervical Spine coming up in Manhattan, Kansas, 29:30, and CMFA Advanced Concept starts August 31st. So lots of great stuff coming at you in August. All right, team. So you hear us in our courses say all the time that you can't make good clinical decisions with bad information, right? And this is bigger than just clinic, right? It's about how we go through our lives in general. But the data that we ever get from a scenario is only as good as the quality of the question that we ask. Yet surprisingly, knowing that, we don't focus very much on the quality of questions that we ask. It's very rare. Don't get me wrong. Every now and then we kind of give some feedback or adjust, or hey, you could have said that differently. But having a real metric and system for sort of checking ourselves on were those quality questions or could they have been better, I think would be really valuable. So I wanted to pause this morning and just chat about, what do great questions look like? What are some of their components or characteristics so that we can recognize them and hopefully ask more of them? So let's start with the basics, right? Great questions don't influence the answer. Perhaps their most important characteristic, right? Especially as we're going through physical therapy evals or other healthcare providers who are listening to this, great questions do not influence the answer, which means they've got to be non-directional and non-judgmental. So, for example, a terrible question is when someone's got back and leg pain, right? So does it start here and go down the leg, right? Couldn't be more leading. Right? That's the pattern that we want to see. We think it's an emerging radiculopathy. We have this in our head. We probably have some recency bias, and we want it to go that direction because it fits our mold, right? So it's very leading. Much better question is, Sarah, you mentioned that sitting increases all these different pain areas. Is there a certain order in which they arise? Right? Is there a certain order in which they arise? Right? No leading, right? No baiting. Just is there a certain order? If any language in response to our examinations could be more important, it would be all day, any change, right? Too often we hear, it doesn't get better. Is this better, right? When really our answer is any change with that. Does that change anything, right? It keeps things non-directional. And because we don't want the question to influence the answer, things like any change are invaluable. So when you've got somebody in that straight leg raise, right, and it reproduces familiar symptoms, and you plantar flex their foot, right, the question is not, is that better? The question is, does that change anything? Right? And the more we get in that habit of any change, the better the data that we're going to be getting from our patients. So really double check yourself in the clinic. How often are you saying, is that better, right? Or how does, right, does that feel better? When what you really want to be saying is there any significant change here? Non-directional is critical, but non-judgmental is really important too, because if you create emotional residue or emotional pushback from people, you're not going to get clear, accurate data, right? Oftentimes you'll get a chronic pain patient, someone who's had pain for a really, really long period of time, having a hard go, and you'll hear providers say things like, John, it looks like this has been going on forever, right? Which just feels judgmental. It feels like, why haven't you done something about it, right? It creates a little bit of pushback in the receiver of that question that is going to, in some ways, taint or color the answer that you get back. Much better is, hey, John, can you share a bit more, man, about your whole journey with this problem? That sounds much more like a question of somebody who really wants to hear the whole story, isn't casting judgment on it. I just want to hear about your journey, man. Like that feel is so much different than this has been going on forever, right? How often do we ask really judgmental questions on the pain scale, right? So somebody marks 5 or 6 pains 12 out of 10, right? And what do we say? 12 out of 10 is not an option, Nancy. I mean, imagine you had a hot poker in your eye. That's a 10 out of 10, right? They can't all be that, right? This is not the kind of question that really makes somebody feel as though you're looking to, number one, be in their best interest, number two, really hear what they have to say. Much better is, Betty, are all these pains identical? Right? Are they unique from one another in any way? Because this begins to give you actionable, usable information. You know that Betty is experiencing a high level of pain, right? What you want to know is, are these pains any different from one another, right? Or is her whole nervous system really on this hypersensitive level that literally all of them are exactly identical and she can't discern between them? Or as she begins to answer that, does she start to say, well, this one's not quite as bad, and now we're getting some usable information, or this one doesn't show up with this? You're really looking to get usable data, so don't paint people into a corner where their answer has to be, yes, they are, in order to defend themselves. Right? Because what we're really saying is you're lying to me, which is a really aggressive comment. I know we don't mean it that way. We're trying to get an accurate pain scale, right, to be able to quantify and track over time, but it's not received that way. So really be thinking about, are your questions non-directional and are they non-judgmental? Because the question should never get in the way of the answer. Okay, number 2, and I think this one's the most important. Great questions, the greatest questions, are rooted in sincere curiosity. And you can feel that from someone who's asking you great questions. Curiosity is most sincere when 2 conditions are met. Number 1, you have a really strong desire to understand this person's lived experience, right? Where they're coming from, what they're worried about, where they're trying to go, and why they want to get there so bad, right? When you're really curious about those things, so you can better connect with that human being, so you can understand their motivations, so you can know what you can leverage inside that story. When you are deeply curious about their lived experience, those questions are incredibly sincere. The second one is when you are challenging competing hypotheses, right, that you've already developed. Your curiosity, your sincere curiosity naturally goes through the roof. This is why we're so strict on the order of when that body chart is done and when those initial hypotheses are formed, because if while you're gathering the history, every piece of information is a critical part of the puzzle to you knowing, right, which pattern this is really falling into, that creates a significant amount of curiosity. You're on the edge of your seat because everything they're about to say is helping you understand which pattern they fall into, which allows you to help them. When you got that injection in your back, did only your back pain go away? Did your hip pain also go away? What about your lower leg pain? The answer to that is going to help you understand, do we have multiple pain generators? Is it only one? Am I going to have to treat the back and the hip or just the back? The point is, you can't wait to hear the answer. There is a natural, authentic, sincere curiosity about that that is a tremendously positive experience for the receiver of that question. I mean, how cool is it? Doesn't matter what the domain is. Right now we're talking rehab, evals, and treatments, but how cool is it when somebody clearly really wants to know about you? Like really authentically and sincerely wants to find out more about what's going on. Great questions are rooted in sincere curiosity because the receiver of them has a strong desire to engage and respond in an equally deep and authentic way. A third component of great questions is that they bring the patient to a deeper level of understanding of their own experience. The point here I'm trying to drive home is it's not just about you. Don't get me wrong. The information you're getting is certainly guiding you. And if you're sincerely curious, right, it's guiding you in very meaningful ways. But it's not just about you, right? A great question allows the patient to connect a lot of dots that they didn't even know were there. Think about the question as you've been going through the eval. Denise, have you seen any relationship between that sleep change and your overall symptom severity? Yeah? And then there's that, you hit that sweet spot when there's that big long pause. And don't interrupt that pause, right? That's when the patient's connecting those dots. That's when Denise is going, right? That moment right there where Denise either looks down and left or up and left. It's always one of the two. It's like, they always kind of look down to the side, and then they follow it with that wonderful statement of, it's funny you say that. And at that moment, you know that you've just helped the patient connect something really important in their history, right? In their problem, in the way that we're going forward. You can feel those synapses forming. Importantly, you didn't do it, right? It's always more important when they do it. And all you have to allow is a great question and a lengthy pause, right? You never, when you land a good question, you never interrupt that looking for more information before you've allowed that patient to make that synapse. Right? Because right after that, it's coming. It's funny you say that. It is funny. Let's get into it. The next one is that it's only two more. The next one is that it establishes the importance and necessity. A great question establishes the necessity of the other individual, in this case, the patient's input. Think about a question like this, right? Donna, what else do we need here to make this body chart complete and accurate? Okay, so you've just taken a body chart on a patient. Now your question is, Donna, what else do I need? The great thing about that question is it assumes, it states, there's no way it's complete without more of your input, right? I've done my best here, but I'm under no delusion that I'm going to be able to do this perfectly without you being heavily involved. Another good example, right? What pieces have I not gathered about your story that are playing a role? What pieces have I not gathered? I'm not asking you, do you have any other questions? That's not a great question, but even better to say, what other pieces have I not gathered? Because that almost forces the patient, right, to assume they're supposed to have a response and now really think, well, you didn't ask about this. And I do feel as though that might matter, right? How could we possibly move forward together if I don't know where you're starting? If I don't know where to come get you? Yeah, and that's why it's so critical they bring their input into the scenario. But if you don't ask questions that demand it of them, that show that I am one piece and you're the other, right? And only together do we move forward, right? You don't often get all of their input. And it's ultimately their input, not yours, that rules the roost here. So great questions establish the importance and the necessity of the other individual's input. The final one that I'll add, because it's probably the one that we don't think about enough of this whole list, is the best question is probably the one that doesn't exist, right? The greatest question is probably the one that you don't ask, meaning you're about to jump in, right, while the patient's thinking, right? While earlier I mentioned the patient's synapse is forming, right? But you jump in because you just thought of something, or you want to try and clarify your question. Right when they're in the middle of going to that next layer deeper, you interrupt that critical process because you didn't have the patience to wait it out. Right? What did Miles Davis used to say? It's not the notes you play, it's the notes you don't play. You've got to leave space if you want excellent communication to evolve. You've got to leave space because in the absence of it, how could it take place? You got to leave space. At first, it's awkward, right? The more and more you begin to believe that very few excellent placed questions with long pauses is what allows you and this individual to walk through the scenario in the most authentic way, the more you're going to crave those spaces, the more you're going to hold back from interrupting them and getting yourself in the way. Those are things I think we've got to think about. When you're thinking about questions, they should never get in the way, right? The question should never influence the answer. Non-directional and non-judgmental. They are always rooted in sincere curiosity, which comes from your desire to want to truly understand the other individual's lived experience. It also comes from proper procedure where you've got guesses, hypotheses created that you are now exploring. So everything the patient says matters so much. Great questions deepen the patient's understanding. Great questions deepen their understanding because of where it brings their mental energy. You know, now that you say that, I guess I never thought about it. Those moments are critical for maximal movement forward. Great questions establish the importance and necessity of the other individual's input. I've done some stuff here. What can I do better? Right? What else do I need to know? Why is this not complete? Those things invite the other individual to know that their input is more, at least as, if not more important than mine. And finally, only ask questions out of necessity. If the ball's already rolling, if they're already going somewhere productive, don't interrupt it out of your urgency. Great communication only takes place when there's space. Give all of that some thought. And when you have that first eval today, just run back through this list real quick and think about the questions you asked and think about the ways you engaged and the level and quality of communication that transpired from it. I hope there's value here. I know in my career, I am more concerned right now in regards to my communication with other individuals about the quality of my questions than anything else. Team, have an awesome Thursday. We'll see you here soon. Hopefully, we'll see you some of you at Virtual Sampler next weekend. But hopefully, everyone's doing awesome. Knock out that gut check. 150 cals every minute on those burpees. 5. Cheers.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.